Welcome to another episode of Faith in 5, a series that provides short answers to big questions. Today's question is, who made God? It's a question I've been asked by people of all ages, from preschool children right through to PhD scientists. In some cases, the question is posed as a kind of knockout blow designed to refute all belief in God. And while it might seem a reasonable question to ask, it actually demonstrates a misunderstanding of the inherent definition of God. Let me explain. Number one, God cannot be a created being. If the answer to the question, who made God, is that some other being or previous being made him, then clearly the being we just called God is not God, but just another created being. And in that case, the being or entity who made him must therefore be God. But who made that being? If some other being made him, then he's not God either, just another created being. And this brings us to the problem of the impossibility of an infinite regress of causes. You see, if you insist that God must have had a beginning and that someone or something must have made him, then the same applies to that preceding being. And then to the one before that, and then to the one before that. And this leads us inevitably to an infinite regress of past causes. But this is where we reach a philosophical impasse, because an infinite regress of past causes is just not possible in the physical universe. The 11th century Persian philosopher Al-Ghazali first pointed out that if there were an infinite number of events or an infinite chain of causes in the past, we would never have actually arrived at the present. In the same way, if we start at the present and work backwards, we could never reach infinity past. You'll just never get there, right? That's the nature of infinity. And that's why it's impossible for an infinite chain of past causes to exist in the real world. So logically, if we're talking about the possible origin of the universe, any proposed chain of past causes must eventually terminate in something that is not itself caused. This is why the 13th century philosopher Thomas Aquinas famously argued that the universe must have an uncaused first cause. Now, I think this is logically irrefutable. There must be an uncaused first cause. And of course, the Christian description of God fits beautifully into this concept. The first verse of the Bible declares that in the beginning, in other words, before time and space came into existence, God was there and he created, the divine creator who has always existed. Now, another way of saying this is that God exists necessarily, not contingently. A contingent being depends on something else for its existence. It has a cause without which it could not exist. Now, the universe and everything in it falls into this category. They are contingent. By contrast, however, a necessary being is its own cause and it cannot fail to exist. Only God falls into this category. Theologian R.C. Sproul explains, God is not a contingent being who depends upon something else for his existence. He is the eternal, self-existent one upon whom all other beings depend. The theological term used to describe God's eternal self-existence is his aseity. It refers to the fact that his existence is eternally generated from within himself. Theologian Louis Berkhoff explains, God is the self-existent one, the ground of his own existence, having the fullness of life in himself. Ultimately, you see, a contingent universe can only be adequately explained by an uncaused, non-contingent first cause. Any other explanation is inevitably going to drift into philosophical absurdity regarding an infinite regression. Well, you see, the question, who made God, is, I think, internally contradictory. It actually makes no sense because it's effectively asking, who created the uncreated one? So how do I answer the question, who made God? Well, to a preschooler, I would say, nobody. God has always existed. That's actually what it means to be God. If someone created God, then he is not God. To a PhD professor, I would say, by definition, God must be the uncreated, uncaused first cause, who exists necessarily rather than contingently, and whose self-existent aseity is the ultimate ground from which all contingent reality springs. You take your pick which answer you prefer. Check out my website, smartfaith.net, for a whole lot more interesting stuff. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.